Ladybower Reservoir is one of the most photographed landscapes in the entire Peak District. Its smooth blue waters, iconic viaducts and the most famous plug holes draw thousands of visitors every single week. But beneath this calm surface lies a powerful story, a story of engineer ambition, post-war planning and sacrifice, the villagers of Derwent and Ashopton that once thrived in the Derwent Valley. So to begin with, we're going to be concentrating on the area around the former Ashopton Village. We've got that site just here dominating the centre of the map, right beside the A57 and also Ashopton Viaduct. I'm going to pop over here and have a look at the former Ladybower Bridge that once took Ashopton Road down towards Bamford before being replaced by the current Ladybower Viaduct. And then it's on to the former Derwent Village, the larger of the two. Plenty to see around here, the old church remains, Derwent Hall and a few other bits and pieces before coming along the other side, taking a look at the valve house and then reflecting on what used to be and what it is today.
Stood at Ashopton Viaduct now, and there's a time when the viaduct and Ashopton Village coexisted. You could probably look down from above here if you was a worker, or maybe the road was open before the village was demolished. But Ashopton Hamlet was a little way down there. Let's pop below and we'll have a look.
The lost village of Ashopton was once found sitting at the confluence of the River Ashop and the River Derwent, and it was a tight-knit farming and mill community. There was a handful of stone cottages, a post office, a blacksmith and the well-known Ashopton Inn, where walkers and shepherds could gather together. As the plans for Ladybower took shape, residents were told their homes and their memories and even their graves were destined to be submerged. By the late 1930s, the compulsory purchases had begun. In 1943, Ashopton's church was demolished piece by piece. Its final service was packed with villagers saying goodbye, not just to their church, but to their entire way of life. And today nothing of Ashopton stands above the water. All that remains is the Ashopton Viaduct, marking the place where the village once breathed.
So I'm stood directly below the first arch of Ashopton Viaduct, and it's absolutely tremendous. It's quite a bit of an echo and reverberation. Now, if we look down at the bottom, you can see where the water is, and if we pan the camera up, you can see that tide mark right in the centre of picture now. And that'd be where the water levels usually rise to, or the maximum depth or height that the water would get to. There's two hatches there, look, and there's little steps either side of the viaduct which are there probably for Severn Trent staff to inspect when the water's high. If I get you a little bit closer, you'll see the open steel flooring and there's a load of twigs on there which have settled from when the water has been as high as that. Now if I take you down the other side, this is where it gets a little bit more haunting, because this was the site of the hamlet or village of Ashopton. You see the viaduct just there, and it's all lost down below. Now Wood Lane that we saw earlier is right over there, and that snaked its way through the village past the Methodist church and the houses and even the pub that was down there, and just there was where the Bamford and Howden Railway crossed over with a viaduct which carried on along there for when it was used for the construction of the dams at the top of the Derwent Valley. So as we look at Ashopton Viaduct, I'm panning down to where Ashopton actually was. I'll try and get a little bit lower down. I'm going to try and roughly point out where a couple of things were. Now Wood Lane came across around about there, so it did or would have run parallel with the viaducts, although it would have done for a short period of time when this was under construction and before it was flooded. So the Ashopton Inn was around about there. And if we pan across a little bit towards the Ladybower Dam, that is roughly where the Methodist church would have been. If we follow this round a little bit more, there are a few houses or properties just on the embankment on the opposite side, and these are probably the only relics or remains of this beautiful village that once stood here. So I've momentarily jumped back to Ashopton Road and Ladybower Viaduct, and I'm going to show you where the original road used to go to the original bridge.
Dead in centre, you have got Ashopton Viaduct with the A57 off to Glossop on the left and off to the right towards Sheffield, and just down here is where the former Ladybower Bridge is that we're just about to look at.
So you can see there where the road is today, and over there is a gate on the right, and that would take the original route down towards Ladybower Bridge. So I've got the viaduct that carries Ashopton Road behind me, but ahead of me we've got an old remains of a bridge, and it's the former Ladybower Bridge, and it carries the Ladybower Brook below it. I'm going to turn you around and show you what this looks like. It looks as if it's going to be quite a beauty. And also looking back, you have noticed that there is still tarmac down and the water is extremely low. So this is the Ladybower Brook, and it comes down with a nice little stream and feeds its way into Ladybower Reservoir. And it's quite tame at the moment, but it's probably got more water in it now than it did a few weeks ago, so we've had some recent rainfall, which is always welcome. I'll turn you about and look at the bridge, and you've got the stone retaining wall coming down, and then suddenly we've lost some look. But it's got that beautiful, beautiful archway, but a lot of the wall has actually gone. I'd say about 4 or 5 feet are missing. That's beautiful, isn't it? Let's see if I can get you on top, and also see if I get you around the other side too. So on top of the former Ladybower Bridge, you can see the brook trickling and meandering its way down into what is currently the water levels of Ladybower Reservoir. That's looking back down. We just stood down there a moment ago. And yeah, you can see a huge chunk of this bridge is missing. Let's jump up here. There we go. Now it's an old path there, look, which will take us around the other side. And there's even an old gate to nowhere. How extraordinary is that? So leaving Ashopton Viaduct behind, we're now going to proceed along Ladybower Reservoir. I'm keeping the water to my left and the path to my right. And let's see what else we can uncover. So one of the next notable points of interest is the grain foot. Nice little bit of interest down here. So I'm going to run down and have a look. There used to be a farm here called Grainfoot Farm, and there's also the remnants of the Grainfoot Brook just down there. Let's go and have a look. Grainfoot Farm was just off to my left, but just behind me, you've got the remnants of the Grainfoot Brook or Clough. And there's a little bit of something I want to show you down there. I am stood around about here, and you've got Grainfoot Farm on the right hand side and the River Derwent on the left. Now to put it into perspective, here is the Google image today, usually completely covered in water, but you can still see where the farm once was and where the Grainfoot flows down to where the course of the River Derwent used to be. This is what I wanted to show you. It is like a stone dam wall, and the water probably at one time, it would have done, it's still carved out just there, look, and it would have gone over after heavy rains, but there is still a flow of water coming out there that I will show you in just a moment. And you can see the water is just trickling out from below that stone wall as we expected it to be. And across the top, look, looking over the edge, I'd say it's probably about 6 or 7 foot high at its lowest point. So one significant thing that has been revealed. Let's see what else we can find as we get closer to the site of Derwent Village. There are also other markers to the past just here beside the Grainfoot. Is these foundations to what I believe to be dry stone walling. Goes a considerable distance down, look. We've got where the water's deposited from the Grainfoot just there, look. And here are some of the outer wall remains of Grainfoot Farm, look. Stone wall surrounds set into the hillside, and another room or outbuilding attachment just there, look. Very interesting, isn't it? So pushing on, one of the more notable things that you will find and discover along reservoirs such as this one are the site of usually a pair of stone gate posts. Here are 2 of those such posts, look, stood there. We've got the bracket still present on this side, look, and there's a hole just below that as well. So you've got to imagine this was probably an access gate to a farm or fields of some sort a little way down there, coming away from any kind of access road up the top there. Look at all the pick markings on there when it's been chiselled out. I wonder how deep these actually go below the surface. I can guarantee that they will not be the only pair of stone posts that we see whilst out today. There's a couple more just there, look, bobbing out of the water. Next up is Derwent Village, and this is the one that everybody likes to come to see. The village that comes from below the water and shares its secrets every once in a while. A little look at the lay of the land of Derwent Village. Derwent Hall off to the left with its fish pond directly in front. Got Bridge End Farm that we'll see a little bit of later. The school is down here. St John's Church is just here. Derwent Village was the larger and more well known of the two. It comprised of a school, there was workshops, a post office and farms, and the beautiful St John the Baptist Church, whose spire would become the village's most iconic landmark. When the flooding began, the church tower was left standing as a marker. For a time, the submerged parts of the church tower would rise out of the water. Our first view of Derwent Village. Right, let's crack on and take a good look at what is showing of Derwent Village. So immediately look, we've got the remains of this farm. Now, in all honesty, this particular piece of ruins, it generally shows itself every single year with it being so close to the edge, so you could have a really wet spring and summer. This bit would often reveal itself, but it's down there that we see our next interesting piece of history. Then opposite the foundations of that farm, we've got this beautiful old pack horse bridge. Now, it's looking a little bit muddy, but I'm gonna give it a go. Yeah, it's all right. There we go. How about that? So that's lovely, isn't it? And we've got this beautiful stream that is often quite raging up there in prolonged periods of wet weather when the reservoir is full or close to being full. That's nice, isn't it? A little bit of, is it iron oxide residue on the right? Let's go over the top and we'll have a look at the other side. And over the top we go, you can see where the stream itself does flow down. You can also see an exterior wall there that would have been foundations to a building just above that we'll have a look at in a moment. If we pan you around and jump down again, show you the other side of this bridge. So we'll cross back over and I will revisit that side, the Derwent Hall side, in a few moments, but let's follow this around, and there are some more foundations, and it'll also take us to the ruins, I believe, of the lost church. All the way around, you can still see the foundations are still set in place. This is remarkable, isn't it? There's a little bit higher up just there, look, and even a bit of red brick. But what is more startling, I'm going to show you around this corner, is we've got a keystone with a date on it, 1867. Look at that, that is amazing. And that little bit of decor on there as well. As we continue around, you can see that outer traditional church walling just there. So it's good to see that it is completely not all been demolished, and more outer wall and base and foundations. Once the dam had filled after its opening in 1943, by 1945 this was the site that you would be greeted. Roughly half of Derwent Church Tower could be seen poking out of the water, but during a dry spell in 1947 the waters receded at quite a rate, and this would then lead to people coming to visit, sightseers, tourists, even people would be taking souvenirs home with them. So this had to be stopped. Well, I'm afraid to tell you something that some of you may find controversial, but all of those that had the memories of seeing the church spire in the 50s and after that, there it is. There's your church tower and your church spire, and this happened to it in 1947. So I've now tried to get some respite and just sat behind. There's the church behind me, look. A couple of things to tell you before we move on. The first thing is, a few of you asked what happened to the bodies in the graveyard. That's a really, really good question, and we're going to jump somewhere else for a moment to explain why. So I'm now in the grounds of Bamford Church, and the reason I brought you here is because a lot of people have asked what happened to the bodies laid to rest in the church at Derwent Village. So they was exhumed and they was brought across carefully and laid to rest in this beautiful, beautiful graveyard. I believe it was even extended to allow all the extra bodies to be relayed here and laid to rest, and that's the end of that story. So if anybody wants to know what happened to all those bodies, they were safely moved over into this beautiful, beautiful graveyard which overlooks some lovely valley and trees. I'm going to brave this mud and get you as close as I can. Here we go. Right, that was a bit slippery, but again we've got more of this wall and it curves around just there, look. And also there's some tarmac just there, which may have actually been the road down to the village where the school was and a few other houses. Look at that beautiful archway. I wish I could get closer, but that is the limit, because look at this. Some have tried, some have gone in wellies. I can't be doing with wellies, it's just asking for trouble. So I'm going to continue to follow this little brook just down to my left, and it's got the original course of the waterway down here, look. And you can also see where a bridge once was, with the stone piling just here and just there, and it must have gone across, and that is coming from up there. Now, leaving the church behind, on the right hand side there were cottages, and the foundations for those cottages are available when we go over the old bridge. And then we've got the outer wall of such a building. Look, and we've got some stone flooring overlooking where the water flow is, just a little way down there. More heavy stone blocks and continuation of the outer wall. Now, just up here was the vicarage. We'll go and look at that in a moment. And here is the road down into the village, which would have cut its way down the hill there. More foundations and perimeter walls. That looks like some kind of outbuilding, doesn't it? And there's a little bit more just here, look, opposite where the church once stood. This lovely coloured photograph shows you the semi-ruined Derwent Church in the foreground on the right hand side. You can see the vicarage in the top left hand side, and just below that are the cottages that is opposite the church that you could have once seen. And also there's some farm buildings on the right. They would be those foundations that we saw at the very beginning of walking into the grounds of Derwent Village. And this is the direction looking towards Derwent Dam. You can't see the dam, I'm just giving you a perspective of which direction it is. The main body of the church closest to us, the tower, and those cottages on the other side of the stream still standing. Incidentally, it's interesting to note that these lasted longer than the church itself. The tarmac edge of a road that once carried early types of cars and also horse-drawn wagons continues to curve down towards where the village was, where the school was, where the graveyard was, and also the church and farmland. And more evidence of the road here, look, and the perimeter dry stone wall curving its way right the way down. Here we go, so that's the view looking downstream. If we go around here again, look at that. That's an absolute beauty, isn't it? And that's what we've got. There's a little stone waterfall which I'll take you to see in a moment. But I love this. Just preserved and lost in time.
In the foreground here we've got the former school. Just behind that is the church, St John's Church, that we've already been walking around. Look up here in the trees, that is the vicarage. And looking at this map, there's the school, there's the church, and up there again is the vicarage.
I'm stood in the grounds of the former Derwent Vicarage. Right here, this is where it was, overlooking what is now the reservoir, but it used to obviously overlook the parish down there and the church. And this was demolished and moved across and rebuilt in the village of Bamford. Now the reason it was demolished and taken apart, even though it is above the waterline, is because there was no church for the vicarage to serve. I can't help but feel that this location where it is would have made an absolutely brilliant holiday let or some kind of cottage overlooking the beautiful views which are there now. There's not a lot to see, but the most spectacular part of the vicarage are the former stone gate posts. Look at the size of those, absolutely stunning. And we've still got the brackets on there, look, and also an iron beam or bar sticking out the opposite side. Absolutely set in stone. And on the opposite side, so this would have been the left hand stone post as you went into the property, also got its gate bracket, look, just one at the top, and also there's one at the bottom. Can you see that? Beautiful. Evidence of stonemason markings all the way down, gashed right down to the bottom, and a different colour on each side due to maybe the way the wind blows. Look at that moss on top. And also one feature of the vicarage was apparently raspberries growing in the garden and around these posts, and I believe they still do. So you can see this hacked off side, which would suggest that the wall did in fact carry on in some way. But then again, did it? It's peculiar. Let's have a look on the other side. You see that's got the full formation, look, curving down and capped off, but this appears to be the same. Oop, nearly tripped then. It's those raspberry bushes. Just here, look, there's no evidence really that that's any different, but that looks like for some reason it has been hacked off, and it must have had something to do with this, some kind of support. There's more original stone wall. So let's step in and have a look at the grounds of where this property once was, and we'll take in the views. We'll look at the maps to see where everything was located, and apologies for the wind. Been a bit unfortunate again with that today, but I'll try my best. This would have been the view looking over from the property, looking down. We've got the church there, we've got the school, we've got the brook feeding its way down, the old Packhorse Bridge is down there, and following on to Derwent Hall just behind me over there. Now that's the view we've got today, and usually, quite often, it's filled with water. But that would have been the vicarage's view overlooking his parish down there, his or her parish looking down over there, which is now water's edge. So what a beautiful location this would have been if the property had still stood. We're now going to move on from the former Derwent Vicarage and the beautiful views that surround, and these two absolutely proud and historical concrete gateposts, which still stand today as a beautiful timely reminder. Okay, it's time to move on to Derwent Hall, a fine building, many rooms and many different lives in its history of what it was used for. Now gone, but there is still the outline of the gardens, the fish pond, and also the rubbly ruins. Stood within Derwent Hall, constructed in 1672 by the Belgai family. And look at this remarkable mixture of normal regular stone mixed in with great big chunks of sandstone, and look how clean and polished they all do look. It's all sorts of different shapes and sizes, like that one there, look. And a lot of these even have holes through them, which must have been to do with supporting the actual joints. There's an outer exterior wall just there, and I've already walked through a room that you just see me come through.
And the room or building that we was just standing in, the way we walked through, was in fact the chapel that was attached to the building. You can see the church in the background. Another image just here, and you can see the chapel on the right hand side. This was a later addition to Derwent Hall.
Look at this. This is where it gets good. A former fireplace. That is remarkable, isn't it? And it's still, you know, it's standing the test of time. Some standard blue brick just there, or it may be red brick, it's just covered in grime from over the years, and another exterior wall. Detail on it. So much effort went into that. It's very extravagant, isn't it? All the way down to the base. Right at the bottom of the gardens and the former grounds and the site of the 1672 built property, the amazing Derwent Hall, built by the Belguy family a long time ago. I think we're going to get all the way around, you know. That's the view looking back, look. You can see how far I've come. The church and the war memorial are just on the other side over there, and that little stream with a bridge is around about there. But not far to go. Fish ponds is where that little bit of water you might be able to see over there. And ironically, that's still the bit that's got water in it. And we're coming up to the point with the former garden that had those bushes. So we made it around the edge of the upper gardens where all the bushes and that stone wall went all the way down there. And I've come to this outer section which is next to the river. And nice bit of stone foundation, look, great big chunks of the stuff. And the river bed is just over there. Lovely little archway just there, look. Still got a bit of the iron bracing underneath the brickwork too. A fine example of craftsmanship, isn't it? And this is probably remains of a cellar. You've got an arch down there, look, where you could probably go underneath, or it would have been a fireplace for down there of some sort. You can see where it's all collapsed in on both sides. Look at all these rooms, there's clearly another cellar just there. You can see like an archway. I can see a brick there, look, with its name on there, Farnley Iron Company. So that's quite good, that is, isn't it? If you zoom in you can read that a bit better. And over there we've got more evidence of these cellars. There's a few of them and it's absolutely brilliant. Let's get ourselves around there and we'll have a poke around. So another former doorway as we move along into the next room. And behind there, there's something special. Look at that gap down there. Is that perhaps water that's flooded into a room just below? Down there is a cellar, an underground passage, which looks like it's got a tunnel going off to the left and something further beyond. So looking to the left as I am stood at the very bottom of this cellar, we can pan across with the beam and you can see a little entrance or opening at the back wall just there, very narrow. I'll just show you the archway a little bit more with this shot, and then I'll show you a still image of that very narrow opening. It looks like it's got a bit of a chute going up, or is this where sludge has come down over the years and filled it up? There's that archway on the left that appears to be bricked up rather than being able to walk through. And there's another angle showing the very same archway. Again, it looks like it's been blocked up.
The hall was a beautiful example of architecture with impressive stonework, ornate gardens and a grand staircase. It changed hands several times over the centuries, eventually becoming a farmhouse and later a youth hostel in 1931. It was compulsory purchased in 1939 and eventually demolished by 1943 to make way for Ladybower Reservoir. Although the hall is gone, its stonework and internal fittings live on in various forms, with some elements reclaimed and transported to Thornbridge Hall, wood panelling installed in offices in Nottingham and Derby. And as you can see, the site of Derwent Hall lies beneath the waters of Ladybower Reservoir most of the times of the year, but its legacy lives on through photographs, videos, descriptions and memories of those who knew it.
Right, so I got myself on the lover's seat once again because there's something interesting to show you now. The water's dropped. You can see it's gone down, gone down, gone down. And then along there, there's a stone lined wall. You can just make it out all the way there, look. And there's a tree stump coming out the side. That is the course of the River Derwent. I've got a couple of photos I can actually show you. Yes, I am laying down on the lover's seat, but I'm on my own. And it shows you there's a drop, and it's a drop of maybe 7 or 8 feet, and it goes down to where the water's edge is. And obviously the stone wall's been put in to keep the river away from the embankments and the gardens, and potentially during flood causing damage to the Derwent Hall adjacent.
We've seen a hell of a lot so far, haven't we? And Derwent Village remains, and Derwent Hall remains too. Absolutely fantastic. So much to see since we began at the old hamlet of Ashopton. There's still more to come. The remains of the water houses, aqueduct, and also an abandoned carcass of a Mini from the 1970s. So now coming up to the perimeter of the water houses buildings. I could put a bit of drone footage up right now from 2022. As this is going to be very similar to what it was back then, showing you what this arrangement looks like from above. So there you go, you've seen that, and now the water houses are just coming into sight. Again, I always seem to feel that these are some kind of pathway arrangements that were present from these buildings over here. And one of these such pathways do bring us over here, look, to what is the main building here, and it does drop down, look, so we can get in there. There'd be a lot of silt in there as well, so this room would have been exceptionally lower. There's a hole in the wall there. Now this has always intrigued me because I think this may have been a cellar just down here, and I've brought a little torch with me. I don't know how good it's going to be. Let me shine it in. Look at that. There's evidence of like a stepped roof. That's going down. That goes down. That is definitely a cellar. You can't quite, I'm trying to, right there, if you can see the beam of light, that goes down a very, very long way. And another bit here. So this probably demonstrates how much silt is actually in here, because I'm going to believe that this is the top of a window frame. So it could be about 5 or 6 feet of mud and silt. We can climb up on top, and again, it looks as though there was some kind of doorway, look, just there, which we'll pass through, and I'll turn you around. You can see that first room that I was in fact stood in. Another one over here. Very, very interesting again. Multiple layers of stone. So there's 2 different kinds of stone there, look. Smaller, and then the larger block formations at the top. An old wooden post there. On the inside, you've got more of a traditional blue brick, again surrounded by further coping stones, and into yet another room, which was probably originally about as low down as the first one that we came into. Through the rooms and out the other side, and we head on over to the last part. There's the aqueduct there, which I believe this to have been some kind of dock or loading bay with the steps going down. Look, there you go. And around this side is a little bit muddy, but I'll be careful, onto this concrete platform all the way along. There it is, look. That's unreal, it's still here after all this time. I'm going to see if I can get the drone over to it, just to have a look at it from a closer perspective. But remarkably, look, its steering wheel is still there. Another angle of it from the rear, look, you can see the steering wheel right where it should be. If we can zoom right in, we could probably get a look at the internals just a little bit better. There's some rocks in there. So gearbox would have been in the middle. That's probably the remains of the passenger chair on the left hand side as well. And from up here, look, from the drone, you can see it again. It's absolutely astonishing looking at it from this angle, slightly from above. It's really, really strange. It's eerie. It is said that that Mini has been there since the 1970s, when it careered off the edge of the hill or the cliff next to it. There's no fatalities reported or injuries, so I wonder if it did crash down with absolutely nobody inside. Right, I've got myself back down to water's level and I'm bang opposite the former Derwent Hall, look. And in the centre of shot is the lover seat was at earlier on. Found ourselves an animal drinking trough, complete with a stone post and a little bit of ironwork in there as well. Look. That's brilliant, isn't it? So of course this has been missing and submerged for a very, very long time. Now looking over there, you can see a post, and also you can see where potentially these were farm buildings just here. Look at these straight lines of stone, which I'm going to follow in a minute. And just there we've got our very own valve slash pump house, previously for the waterworks. But that is a stunning little find. And again, it's off to Google Maps and Scottish Maps to take a look at what we're looking at right now. So we're still in the vicinity of the village of Derwent. We're just below Derwent Hall. Goes to the faded map and we'll see that it was Bridgend Farm. So it looks like it really was a farm that we're looking around, and that provides the proof in the pudding for the fact that that is an animal water or feeding trough, especially as we look at the clear map now from around 1900. You can clearly see Bridgend Farm
and the Derwent going through the centre, and the main village on the opposite side. Now I can't get to that. It's really, really windy and it's really, really muddy. You can see where people have actually done it in wellies, most likely. Can't get to that. Look at the peculiar shape of this stone wall going around like that. Must have been to do with farming.
Now the valve house being the only entire building still present on the base of the reservoir, the old village of Derwent, I've seen some people write comments on social media asking why did they build this if they were just going to put it underwater. Well, of course from this image you can see it was around at the same time as the village and is far, far older than the reservoir itself.
Bamford and Howden Railway was constructed between 1901 and 1903 and its sole purpose was for the construction of Derwent and Howden dams and reservoirs, and it operated for those years up until 1916 when the dams were completed. I think I've found evidence of that former track bed. Now first of all, let me show you what's behind. So the viaduct, Ashopton Viaduct, is just around there. We've got all the water, but then we've got this. Look at that. Now if I follow that rocky grass there and get to the other side, further down it does in fact look like there is another retaining wall for which was probably the railway, and it does hug the edge of the reservoir, exactly where it used to operate all those years ago. So this time we'll have a look thanks to railmaponline.com and also Google. You can see that purple line going from bottom to top, Ladybower Reservoir and Dam at the bottom, and stretching all the way up is the other end of Ladybower. And if we zoom in, you've got the A57 and Ashopton Viaduct going from left to right, and the little bit of former railway track bed we've found is right about here. So following the edge, look, you can see that stone wall just there, and that is where I was just sat. You can see that's man-made, that's purposely been built, and exactly the same on the other side, look. That's remarkable. So are we in fact stood atop the track bed of the former Bamford and Howden Railway, constructed 120 years ago? Let's follow this little bit of a trail and we'll go up to the other wall, which isn't far down here. If it's safe to do so, I'll get us down alongside it as well. So yeah, stone wall, which is going to be built to stop collapse of the embankment, because it is relatively flat just here before you can see it's collapsed down over the years. And I can get you to the other side. Don't look like I can get down, I don't think. I'll try. Let me step over here. Don't want to do anything silly, and see if I can get us down. Yes, there we go, look at that. Isn't that remarkable? Now of course this railway did close after completion of the dams in 1916, but part of it did get relaid and reopened, and that was the bit from Bamford up to the construction site of Ladybower Dam and Reservoir. You can also make out a white line along there, look, all the way along. It goes all the way along. Is that the tide mark for the highest level of water? It goes all the way down there. That'd be really interesting to know. That means my head is probably at water's level when full. This down here is a continuation of that piped aqueduct. This is the Derwent Valley Aqueduct, and it's actually something that runs all the way to Sawley, near Long Eaton, near East Midlands Airport, and also Langley Mill, pretty much on the Nottingham-Derbyshire border. I think this would be an interesting walk to try and follow this route, and it's something I may do over the winter of 25 and 2026. Right, so what I've got behind me is another one of those probable pump houses or pumping station. This is the one from the opposite side that I mentioned earlier on, right at the very beginning of the video. There's Ashopton Viaduct, look over there, and you've got to imagine this is what is underwater back that way. We saw it earlier and we could see the curved roof, couldn't we? But it was just tiled. You can see this was probably also tiled, but it's been covered in some sort of reinforced shotcrete and weatherproofed as well. So this gives us a really good idea of what the one looks like that is usually lost and submerged at Derwent Village. So again, taking a look at the Scottish side by side, on the right hand side you've got the Google Maps and the Ashopton Viaduct, and on the left hand side you can see that it is not there. But if you can just imagine the viaduct being there for one moment, and then looking below you can see the small hamlet of Ashopton and the roads and the buildings such as the Ashopton Inn, the Methodist Church too. Just imagine what was once deep below that water.
Today, Ladybower is a place of beauty, recreation and reflection. Walk the shoreline and you're treading above lost homes. Cross the viaducts and you're travelling over forgotten roads. Look out across the reservoir and you're staring into a valley that once echoed with laughter, market carts, church bells and the everyday rhythm of village life. The story of Ladybower Reservoir isn't just about water, it's about people, memory and the landscapes we reshape in the name of progress.
So here I am back at Ashopton, and the final point of this walk. Now Ashopton, it used to have a Methodist church. It was built in 1840, and on the 25th of September 1939 the Methodist church performed its final service, and there was a final hymn, and this was sung with great sadness. The day's dying in the west, and then the Methodist church and Ashopton was soon gone for good. Bye bye.